Okay. All right. 1 second. Okay, hold on. Oops. All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Jessica, and I am the founder and owner of Encompass Tutorial Services, where we focus exclusively on helping our clients build executive functioning skills that decrease procrastination and increase confidence. I am so excited to share with you some of the tips and tricks on how to stop the cycle of procrastination. So today we're going to spend the first half, I'm just going to let a few more people in. Today we're going to spend the first half talking about executive functioning. What is it and how does it interact with ADHD and anxiety? We're then going to move to talking about motivation. What is it and how to prevent procrastination? And then we're going to spend the last half of our time, of course, talking about how you can help your kids to procrastinate less. Okay, so again, I just want to thank you all so much for being here. I imagine this is going to raise a lot of questions. So as I go through, please write them down and I will absolutely be able to address them afterwards. Okay, let's get started. So let's just begin by clarifying, what is executive functioning and why is it so critical to academic success? There are many ways to discuss executive functioning: cognitively, neuropathically, behaviorally. At Encompass, we define executive functioning as the skills and systems needed to successfully manage and execute multiple and varied tasks strategically and without stress. This means without the procrastination, all that overwhelm, and maybe even hyper-focusing at times. More simply, it's our ability to engage comfortably, confidently, and consistently. So, people at any age can struggle with low executive functioning. That means they struggle to keep track of everything they have to do, break down tasks that cannot be done in one sitting, prioritize successfully or strategically, and so I'm gonna let a few more people in, utilize their time wisely or estimate time successfully, stay organized or keep track of materials, pay attention or work for sustained periods of time without getting distracted or bored, manage their feelings around tasks that can be, oops, sorry guys. I think my thing is letting people in and it's getting all messed up. Manage their feelings around tasks that can be overwhelming or intimidating. Understand why they should do certain things and what their goals are. And most critically, they struggle not to procrastinate or avoid. So the symptoms of low executive functioning will vary depending on where we are in life. But for students, the symptoms of low executive functioning are often just not knowing what their work is, having difficulty keeping track of deadlines, submitting work that is late or partially completed or does not meet the demands of the rubric, forgetting to submit work, disorganization, studying ineffectively, reluctance to ask for help, generally being avoidant and procrastinating. And the consequence of all of the above is to have lower and consistent grades. I am sure you are all thinking, yep, that sounds like my kids sometimes. Well, here's the good news. Utilizing strong executive functioning strategies reduces these symptoms and reduces procrastination. Okay, hold on, I'll let someone else. Okay, so what are these strategies? There are 5 critical steps to executive functioning that reduces procrastination. To start, we need to utilize tools, build routines, and establish habits that just simply allow us to keep track of everything we have to do. I mean, I think as adults, we can relate to this. Students, it's a bit easier with, Google Classroom and Skyward, but it can still be hard to keep track of everything: the tests, the projects, the soccer practices, getting the permission slip signed. Task awareness is the first step. We then need to prioritize based on personal metrics of success. We're going to talk a bit more about this later, but value metrics are critical to motivation. Why are we doing one thing before another? Is it easier? Does it affect my grade? Is it less stressful? And thirdly, then we want to break down anything that cannot be done easily. Easily is defined as it cannot be done in one sitting, and it cannot be done without inciting stress or anxiety or overwhelm. The example I always give to adults is taxes. Usually they cannot be done in one sitting, usually very overwhelming. So it's easy to avoid them, even though we know they're important and the consequences of not doing them are serious. 4, we then utilize tools, build routines, and establish habits that enable us to strategize and organize our time in order to meet the demands of our tasks. What am I going to do? When? For how long? In what order? And number 5, this, in my opinion, is the most critical. It's the ability to reflect and correct without judgment. We are always getting new tasks and homeworks and responsibilities on our plate. And it's essential to our functioning that we can pause and reflect on what's working and what's not. And so we can correct it as needed. It's better that I started with my math, but I should do it before dinner because I always run out of time after dinner. This shame and judgment that is so heavily adjacent to procrastination drives procrastination. So we want to reduce judgment in order to increase engagement. So while all of us can struggle in our own ways with executive functioning and procrastination, people who have ADHD or are neurodivergent, suffer from anxiety and mental health issues, or have learning differences such as processing disorders, dyslexia, or dysgraphia, they're going to have greater challenges around executive functioning, regardless and completely independent of intelligence. Here is a key point I cannot overstate. Intelligence has nothing to do with procrastination, nothing. Additionally, the desire to be successful usually has nothing to do with procrastination. And we're going to talk more about that in a little bit. Almost everyone I support is incredibly intelligent and curious or creative. They have a desire to find some success. It may not always be in the classroom, maybe with their hobbies or with sports. Everyone else I support also struggles with their executive functioning and procrastination. This is what's known as twice exceptionalism. The National Association for Gifted Children defines twice exceptionalism, or 2E, as a way to label gifted people who struggle due to acute deficits. This means that they often excel in one or more subjects, but struggle immensely in others. More broadly, they struggle to keep up with the demands of school. They simply struggle with the core symptoms of executive functioning, especially procrastination. And here's why this matters. While not every person who struggles with their executive functioning has attention deficits or anxiety, for example, every person with attention deficits and anxiety shows symptoms of low executive functioning. That is why they are so often discussed in tandem. This is largely because the brain chemistry of a person with ADHD means these executive functioning skills, keeping track of everything, prioritizing, managing our time, it's not intuitive. It's not intuitive at all. And when we are not able to intuitively manage our tasks and responsibilities the way we are told that we should just be able to keep track of everything and get our work done and ask for help, this exacerbates anxiety. So the lower our functioning, the higher our anxiety, and the higher our anxiety, the lower our functioning. So it sadly becomes a mutually reinforcing cycle that interlocks ADHD, low executive functioning, and anxiety. Because of this, people with ADHD and anxiety are going to struggle to a greater degree with procrastination. This is related to something called object permanence. Object permanence is the understanding that objects don't exist if we can't sense them. So think out of sight, out of mind, or differently, more like tunnel vision. If I don't see that task, it's not in my tunnel, I'm not doing that task. This means that it's very hard to hold multiple tasks in time at once. I can focus on this homework, but it's hard to think about the next one because it's not in my tunnel. It also makes it very hard to keep track of materials like a planner. If I don't see the planner, I'm not using the planner. It also makes it hard to stay organized and keep organized spaces. Again, if I'm playing video games, I don't really care about the rest of my messy room. And it critically makes us prone to time blindness and hyperfocus that is the leading cause of procrastination. So part of what we're going to discuss in the latter half of this presentation is how you can help your children reduce the symptoms of object permanence and procrastinate less. Okay. Another common symptom of both ADHD and anxiety that impacts procrastination is called rigid and binary thinking. This is black and white, good or bad, all or nothing. That's the binary aspect. And it's very difficult to switch between these modes of thinking. That's the rigidity aspect. Rigid and binary thinking can perpetuate anxious thoughts, such as I'm a good or bad student. If I'm doing one thing wrong, I must be doing everything wrong. Everyone else is doing better than me. And when this worldview is challenged, because we don't live in a black and white world, it gets upset, makes us upset. It can exacerbate anxiety, the exact anxiety that leads to procrastination. Additionally, and kind of more practically, it makes it very hard to manage the way we think about our work. It makes us want to do our work, all of our work in one sitting or not at all. It makes it hard to break down our work into manageable components, especially if they are big or varied. Most students just see the work monolithically. I have any homework feels big or stressful, I'm not going to do it. This kind of thinking, and this is critical, is why vague or unclear instructions are not motivating. In fact, they often prompt procrastination. Okay. And procrastination, not doing the tasks we know we have to do, this is tied to motivation. This is kind of the secret sauce, because at the core of our ability to execute and function is our ability to actually do the work, our motivation. This is critical because this is that question like, why won't they just do their work or do their work in a way that is healthier? So motivation is a tricky beast, but essentially there are three foundational pillars that either prop up our motivation or deplete it: value, environment, and feelings. So if motivation is the desire to act in service of a goal, then we must be able to identify our goals, the value of the work. Okay, put a little more simply, if we don't see the value in the work, the less likely we are to have the motivation to do that work. So this requires self-awareness, which is especially hard for all of us, even teenagers, and the ability to not negotiate that value. First way to think about it is intrinsically. I have to like it and feel good about it, find the work interesting, take pride in it. This is the most reliable kind of motivation. I don't really struggle to eat popcorn and watch Netflix. I like it and it feels good. It's reliable. The second way is to think about value extrinsically. These are the outside forces that pull us into doing the things we don't want to do. This is most commonly grades, or wanting to impress a teacher or our friends, college, or maybe privileges at home. This is the most powerful. Many students are often not aware of the value of the work, or more honestly negotiate it. It's like, I know I should do this homework, but it is so boring, no intrinsic value. And it won't really matter, I guess, if it's a day late, or I turn it in next week, or I go to talk to my teacher tomorrow. That's the extrinsic part. Or commonly, I don't see any value in this. There's no point in doing this. Or I've put too much value on it, and now I'm overwhelmed by it. So it will be critical to helping our kids learn how to articulate their goals, the value of the work, in order to help them do the work. More on that to come. The second critical factor that affects our motivation is our environment. This is the most pragmatic and concrete of the three factors. When we do not have an environment suitable to working for sustained periods of time, we don't work for sustained periods of time. This includes our physical space and routines. Where do I work? When and for how long? How do I minimize distractions? What should I start with? How long should it take? When do I get a break? For people with ADHD and anxiety, the answers to these questions, again, they're not intuitive. This is why having strong executive functioning strategies is so critical to motivation, because it reduces the decision fatigue that leads to procrastination. I don't know where to begin. I don't know how long this is going to take. I don't know how long I have to sit here for. I don't want to do this. So your job as a parent is to help reduce this fatigue by creating an environment at home that encourages motivation. Lastly, it's important to recognize that it's a universal truth that we are inclined to quite literally turn away from the things that make us uncomfortable and overwhelmed, insecure and anxious, uncertain about our approval or our future. And when those feelings get big, our ability to focus, task switch, prioritize, and engage just plummet. We're going to unpack this a bit more, but here is the key takeaway. The higher our anxiety, the lower our functioning, our motivation. Okay. These categories are not mutually exclusive. In fact, they often work together to short circuit motivation. So I just want to summarize. It is for this reason that you want to help your children identify the clear value behind the work, create an environment at home that is going to help them actually do the work, and alleviate the stress around the work where possible. Before we move on to how we actually do this, let's hone in on procrastination, because that's really why we're all here today. So again, it is important to understand that when we don't see the value in our work, when we don't know how to approach our work, and we have big feelings about our work, we cope in one of two ways. You guessed it. First way is procrastination. This is a coping mechanism to manage stress and anxiety, to make it literally go away. It's like, no, thank you. I don't want to think about you, let alone engage. It's just too much. I will either negotiate the value, find a very yummy distraction, but yeah, no, I am not doing that. So by procrastinating, by turning away from the work, it's no longer so overwhelming or stressful. The other way looks more like hyperfocus and perfectionism. This is another coping mechanism to manage similar anxiety around the work. So we have perfectionism, compulsing around the work, not handing work if it's not done or not deemed good enough, and on and on. The idea is if I just do and do and do and do, then I won't feel the feelings of maybe shame or inadequacy around that work. So it can look productive, but is honestly very unhealthy. What really comes up in the conversation around procrastination is this idea of apathy, right? I mean, it makes sense. If they cared, they would just do the work. It can be so frustrating to watch avoidant students and not judge them for maybe being lazy, disinterested, short-sighted, immature. But here's the rub. It's rarely apathy. Most students do care on some level, but they just, again, don't know how to approach the work due to executive functioning deficits related to ADHD and anxiety, most commonly. So they feel overwhelmed, insecure, and shame, and they turn away. But it's hard to admit that when you're a teenager, so it often can just present like apathy. And that's what makes procrastination so tricky. I know what you must be thinking, but seriously though, if they cared, they would just do the work. It's really not that easy. Let me explain. Let's imagine this table. It's like flat, even, healthy. This is what we want in order to not procrastinate. But when the stress of a task hits our table, this is when we start to avoid. Our table tilts. I will give you a very honest example. I hate paying my electricity bill. I hate it every month, especially around the holidays. I dread it. I know it's going to be high, so I'll tell myself, I will do it tomorrow. I'll do it this weekend, and I start to avoid. We all have our version of this. This is like the doctor's appointment we know we need to schedule, or checking our bank account. Again, it's a natural coping mechanism to turn away from things that make us uncomfortable. But when the outcome of that procrastination becomes apparent, it tilts our table back upright. So to continue with my electricity bill example, of course, I still experience stress paying my electricity bill, but the outcome, the consequence of not paying it, losing my electricity, having to explain that to my family, tips me back upright, and I always pay my bill on time. This is because, and here's the point, the stress of the outcome becomes greater than the stress of the task itself. This is why chronic procrastinators say they need the stress of a deadline in order to get anything done. Okay. So it's not unreasonable to experience stress or to avoid certain tasks. But when the outcome, the consequence of not doing the work, does not tip us back into engagement, we know something's really wrong. This means that the stress of doing the work is so great that not all of those big dramatic consequences are enough to incite engagement. In fact, in all honesty, the consequences often compound the stress that lead to paralysis, the low grades, the awkwardness with you, their teachers. All of it just becomes overwhelming, and the table just tips and tips and tips, and we get stuck. So, in order to help our kids stop procrastinating, to help prop up their table, we must again tie healthy value to the work and create an environment that is healthy to do the work. In doing so, we reduce the stress around the work that causes the table to tilt in the first place. If the work is not stressful, then there's no reason to procrastinate and avoid it. Okay. So the $1 million question is, how do we do all of this? Now that we've got this foundation, I want to move into actionable things that you can do at home. Give me 1 second. To start, you want to set clear and consistent expectations. This may seem the most obvious, but it is often the most challenging for parents. What are your expectations? Are they consistent? Are they actionable? Are your kids aware of them? When establishing expectations, they should be explicit, clear, actionable. For example, when it comes to establishing expectations around engagement, implied, unclear, vague, is not effective. I just want you to try your best. Versus explicit, clear, and actionable. I expect you to check your planner every day while dinner is being made. When it comes to establishing expectations around outcomes, implied, unclear, and vague is ineffective. No missing work. Okay, sure. Versus explicit, clear, and actionable. I expect you to check your planner every day while dinner is being made. If we don't know what's expected of us in actionable terms, then we really don't know what to do or how to get that outcome. And so we're probably not doing anything at all or doing the wrong thing. So you want to be specific. You should be able to say, did you do this? Yes or no. Okay. Excuse me. 1 second. Routine building is one of the best things you can do for your children to reduce procrastination and increase engagement. It aligns with the environment pillar of motivation. By taking the guesswork out, we experience less of the decision fatigue that makes us give up. I don't know what to do. I won't do anything at all. Routines should not be at a set time, as that will fall apart. Life always gets in the way. Every day is different. So we want routines to be around events that we know just happen every day, right when I get to school, while dinner is being made, just after dinner. Again, let's take the guesswork out. I encourage you to establish routines around when they check their planner. This should be daily. When they should start working, for how long? Work for 30 minutes after dinner. Work while dinner is being prepared, for 1 hour before we leave for soccer practice. Where to work? Their desk, at the kitchen table. Really, the only space I would say is off limits is the bed. Designated breaks and times not to work. This will allow them to perceive your expectations as reasonable. Okay, I know I have to work for 30 minutes while dinner is being made, but I get to take a 30-minute break after dinner. And it will allow them to take breaks without the guilt of avoidance. Okay, when it comes to establishing healthy routines at home, we must acknowledge the obstacle that haunts us all, which is screens. Most teens struggle with phones and video games. They often disappear into them almost to avoid thinking about homeworks and chores. Almost every student I talk to, when we talk about procrastination, what do they do when they should be working? They're on their phone or playing video games. To be honest, this is largely a result of these past few years. I mean, screens have been a primary social outlet and increasingly the most common way that teachers communicate and assign work. So, it's important to set moderate and healthy boundaries. But we all know that when we limit screen time, it never goes well. It feels like the phone is getting taken away for no reason, arbitrarily, and it's not motivating. So I'm going to take your phone away until you do your homework. It just causes a fight. It's not motivating. So let's take that guesswork out. What are clear times they should expect to have or not have their phone, such as during X time while they work at Y location? So while dinner is being made at the kitchen table or during family dinner, it's up to you. Where the phone is going to be kept while you are in possession of it. I wouldn't put it in anyone's particular bedroom, probably a neutral spot like in the fruit bowl, on the dining table, on a bookshelf, things like that. What clearly needs to happen to regain access to the phone? Is it a duration of time? You will get your phone back in the morning. Or is it when they have followed through on the expectation? You didn't take the trash out. You should expect for me to have the phone, then you will get the phone back. What are privacy settings while they are not in possession of it? Turned off, airplane mode. I know this may feel extreme, but again, the more explicit and specific you are with setting these boundaries, the more successful they will be. It's just personal to your family dynamic, but the larger point is that they are clear and specific. But we have to reinforce these routines and expectations, otherwise they're just not going to do any of them. That's why once you set your expectations, it will be important to define clear consequences. By the way, this parenting model is part of the Nurture Heart approach. If you want more information about it, I'd be happy to talk to you after the presentation. So I think it's natural. Most of us turn to punitive consequences, such as taking the phone away, grounding. The idea is that if the pain of the consequence becomes so severe, then they will clearly change their behavior so that they no longer have the consequence. I want my phone, so I'm going to stop doing this thing or start doing the thing they want me to do. But if they're unpredictable and reactionary, which I know we can all be, then this just leads to tension and anger, because this is all about what you want. You want them to be doing something and you want to take the phone away. So let's make it about them. They are teenagers and they want it to be all about them. As always, we want these consequences to be explicit, clear, and actionable. Also, this should not at all revolve around grades. Rather, if you do X expectation, you will earn Y. You will earn Y. If expectation is not met, I'm not upset. You just haven't earned. Y should either be a privilege they already have access to, like their phone, or it can be a privilege they don't have but want, like more driving practice, an extended curfew, more time with friends, picking dinner, anything like that. Why does this work? It puts the emphasis on the positive. You've earned this, and less on the negative. You've done bad, I'm taking it away. And because we want to keep negative feelings low so functioning can stay high, this reinforces behavior positively. And it makes it all about them, which they're going to be more susceptible to. They're going to be more into that. Okay, I want to shift gears now and talk about how do we reinforce strong time management strategies at home. This is how do we organize our time to get everything done and not procrastinate. One of the most critical components of strong time management is understanding the huge difference between what is due and how we do that work. I cannot tell you how many students I talk to that say they don't need a planner. They can keep track of everything in their head. They can just go online. They know what their homework is and when it's due. But remember, task awareness, knowing what is due, is just the very first step of our functioning. And most students do not know how to do the work that they are aware of, the remaining and essential 4 steps of our executive functioning. So when we differentiate between these two, it allows for explicitness and clarity around actionable items. This is what, again, reduces procrastination. It's great that you are aware that you have a math test on Friday, but the focus needs to be on what are we going to do, the actions around that. Adjacent to this is differentiating between DUE and DO is differentiating between tasks and outcomes. It's so easy to conflate these two. Let's take the example of a clean kitchen. I always see the value in a clean kitchen. I always want to have a clean kitchen, but that is an outcome based on a series of tasks. Emptying the dishwasher, reloading the dishwasher, wiping the counters, cleaning the stovetop, which I personally hate, and on and on. So it's easy to want a clean kitchen, but not be motivated to do the tasks around that. It's also easy to think, well, what's wrong with me? It's as simple as having a clean kitchen, but it's not that simple if we locate the tasks behind it. Same goes for approaching our homework. I want the outcome of being prepared for this test. I do, I really do, Mom. But I'm having a hard time recognizing and strategizing around all the multiple and varied steps that result in that outcome. So in helping our kids differentiate between the two, by focusing on the actionable tasks, it allows us to reduce that threat or anxiety around the outcome. Because it's this focus on the outcome, my grade, or I'm going to fail, or I'm going to embarrass myself. This anxiety is what leads to procrastination. So this is an example of a compass planner, but this methodology can work in any planner really, because it illustrates how to help students differentiate between what is due and how we're going to do that work, between honestly the outcome and the tasks. When it comes to successful time management strategies, we want to understand that when we have a lot of work, especially work that cannot be done in one sitting, that it feels big and unmanageable and overwhelming. And remember, if you have ADHD or anxiety, all work is going to feel big and overwhelming. So as part of step 3 and 4 of our functioning, we want to break down that work into manageable components and establish strategies to engage with those components. There are 4 key strategies that will make the work feel more manageable and promote engagement. The first, bucket. This could be across classes, types of assignments, home life versus school. Color code across these buckets. Timestamp. How long do we think each thing will take? Number prioritize. What should I do first, second, or third? This is dependent on value metrics. If you're talking to your child about where should they begin, a good place to start is to ask what feels easiest, what feels most interesting, or what feels most difficult, and maybe they want to get it out of the way. That's a good platform to start talking about how to number prioritize. You can see here that this student has 4 assignments this week that include a worksheet, a test, a paper, and a project. Very different types of assignments with very different tasks to get us to that outcome. We have color-coded each so that it doesn't look so overwhelming and monolithic, and the student can more easily see the steps in the do section that correlate to finishing each assignment on time in the DUE section. You can also see in the DO section that we have time-stamped each assignment and number prioritized so that our students know exactly what to do in what order for how long. So when talking to your kids, the more explicit you are about how to approach the work, the more it appears manageable and the more likely they are to do that work. Here's another way to think about it. We all, myself included, make to-do lists that feel unwieldy. It's just a big old list of things to do. It may seem elementary, but for someone who struggles with ADHD and anxiety, these 4 strategies are essential to engagement. Now my to-do list isn't just a big monolithic mess. Rather, I have 3 categories or buckets: personal, professional, and taxes, which I have further broken down into actionable and manageable steps, because like I said, taxes is the most intimidating for most adults. I know how long each task will take. I have a better idea of when I'm going to do some of these tasks, and I'm incorporating the notion of habit stacking. Once we've bucketed, color-coded, time-stamped, and number prioritized, we still have to engage with the task. It's far easier to engage with tasks when we can align them with other tasks or routines we do more easily or more consistently. In this case, this is true. I'm going to go to the grocery store, which I hate, after I go to my yoga class, which I love. So for kids, we can encourage them to check their planner each morning after breakfast. We know we eat breakfast every day. Set their alarm at night after they shower. Pack their backpack right after dinner. While seemingly simple, encouraging your kids to habit stack will greatly increase the probability of their engagement, because it takes out that guesswork of when am I supposed to do this? And it piggybacks it into something more easily. Another time management strategy to help curb procrastination is to talk to your kids about approaching their work in terms of task versus time. This is part of step 3 of our executive functioning, breaking down a task that cannot be done easily into manageable components. Just a reminder, easily is defined as it cannot be done in one sitting or cannot be done without invoking stress. When talking with your kids about their work, what is your homework tonight, all of that, it is important to first ask them how they feel about that work. If they express that it cannot be done, easily, then ask if they want to think about it in terms of task versus time. Let's take the example of an essay. They have an essay due later this week. Usually it cannot be done in one sitting or should not be done in one sitting. And because they often count for a bigger grade, they can be considered a big assignment and stressful. Task. I'm going to start with the outline. I'm not going to think about the rest. I want to focus here and then I get to feel good. Time. I'm going to spend 30 minutes working on it. I'm not going to think about how far I get or what comes next. I want to focus here and then I get to feel good. As adults, let's come back to that clean kitchen quickly, like where to begin, dishes, counters, but first I have to unload the dishwasher. It's like, I guess it's not that messy. Task. I'm going to unload the dishwasher, then I get to stop and reassess and see how I feel, but regardless, I get to feel good. Time. I'm going to clean my kitchen for 20 minutes. However far I get to feel good. It's the same thing. It's the sense of accomplishment, the sense of feeling good that propels our motivation and stops procrastination in its tracks. It's important to acknowledge, though, that task switching, switching between tasks or components of time, like maybe coming back from winter break or between subjects and assignments, can be really hard. It can actually feel paralyzing at times. For your kids who struggle, it's important to allow them to reset. The best way to reset is to literally change it up, change your environment. Walk outside of the house, go get a fresh glass of water, go do this work in a different part of the house. And actual environmental change does wonders to reset. Also, resiliency and focus is so hard for someone with low executive functioning. This again is not laziness that they are getting burnt out so quickly, it's brain chemistry. So we want to allow for small breaks in between assignments and subjects when possible, so the brain can just reset and recharge. Again, this doesn't need to be long. This is literally going to the kitchen and coming back, stepping outside, going for a quick walk. And of course, incentives are also great for kids. After you switch between these two tasks, you've earned. This resetting will help your kids work for longer stretches of time and focus on multiple and varied tasks more easily. Before we move on, I do want to talk about study strategies, because this is a big one I hear from parents. They just won't study, or they rush studying and they don't study well. So similarly to time management strategies, the more explicit you can be, the more likely they will actually study. Kind of this implicit instruction, just study, it's too vague. It's unclear. What do you even mean by that? And also, it's not going to prompt them to engage. In fact, it's likely going to overwhelm them because they don't know what to do. And tests are usually a big deal and they count for grades. So it's an ambiguous ask to study with pretty big consequences. So when being very specific, our study skills checklist asks you to first identify the class and the test date, identify the content and the comfort level, with the material. This is a big one. This goes back to talking to your kids about how they feel. Identify the format of the test. We don't study for all tests the same way. Identify 3 study strategies that meet the demands of the format and align with their comfort level with the material. Identify a time management strategy. How long are they going to study? When? Recognize whether or not they need to utilize their accommodations. And I like to set an executive functioning, an attitude, and a grade goal. This helps them to understand and gain awareness around what it is they're trying to achieve. It ties value to studying, which means it's going to be more motivating. It is this explicit breaking down of steps and incorporating actionable strategies that align with their goals that will get your kids to actually study. Okay. Let's talk about some great communication strategies to encourage motivation and reduce all of that tension. Teenagers, particularly teenagers with ADHD and anxiety, do not do well with open-ended questions, especially when it comes to talking about the things that stress them out, school and grades. For example, do you have a lot of homework tonight? How did the test go? They may not know how to answer that or even want to think about it. It's overwhelming and it can feel frustrating. I, of course, don't want to script the way you talk with your kids, but you will get far more information if you can ask questions that can be answered with a one-word binary response. Let me explain. Teenagers are prone to think in binaries that are personalizing. Good, I'm bad, I'm smart, I'm stupid, it's success, failure. So let's appeal to that natural brain chemistry and provide them with a new vocabulary. We like words such as consistent, inconsistent, manageable, unmanageable, reasonable, unreasonable, earn, not earn, follow through, not follow through, confident, and unconfident. So instead of, do you have a lot of homework tonight? Try, is your homework tonight manageable or unmanageable? They can just give you a one-word response. How did the test go today? Can become, did you feel confident or unconfident about the test today? Providing both half of that binary will give you a door into greater communication. Another communication strategy I encourage you to use is code words. I don't know about y'all, but I find myself nagging about the same topics over and over again. Just the process and the time to express, please start your homework again, clean your room again. It's exhausting and nobody likes it. There are many studies that show that simplifying certain, maybe repetitive or negative experiences or feelings into a single code word, I think the funnier the better, helps encourage communication. I see them procrastinate and they're playing video games and they said they'd start their work. Godzilla. This will also encourage them to talk to you more easily. I'm so behind. I don't want to do any work. I just want to play video games. Maybe it's Babe Ruth. It can be a little awkward to start, but they do come in handy and reduce a lot of tension. Another excellent communication strategy also comes from the nurtured heart approach. Sarah is essentially a way to acknowledge and validate positive behavior that often gets ignored because it's just assumed or expected. So for many of our students that procrastinate, they feel that the only attention that they ever get is negative. And as we learned, we avoid the very things that make us feel bad. So they avoid school or interacting with you. Sarah starts with acknowledging what they are doing. I see you spending time studying, validating them. I appreciate that you're taking school seriously, making it about them. This shows me that you are independent and committed. This tells me that you are going to do great on the test. And can you hold this? I hope that you can see what I'm seeing. Again, it can be a bit awkward. I encourage you just to adapt it to your own speaking style. But when done consistently, it helps build self-esteem. And the better we feel, the more motivated we are to do the things we used to turn away from because they make us feel bad. Okay, there are two topics that are always the landmine when talking to our kids about school. The first topic is their intelligence, AKA, I know you can do this work. You're so smart. I hear all the time, my kid is so smart. I just don't understand why they can't do the work. When we talk about school, it's natural and easy to confuse comprehension, I understand the math, with the demonstration of comprehension, I am able to do the math homework. I'm even aware I have a math homework. I can find the math homework. I'm not overwhelmed by the math homework. But it's critical that we really do understand the difference between the two, because intelligence and comprehension align. And as we've learned today, intelligence has nothing to do with the other half, with our ability to demonstrate our comprehension. So let me say it again. Intelligence has nothing to do with our ability to do our work. But when we make it about intelligence, it can be upsetting. It feels personal. It's like, well, maybe I'm not that smart because I keep having late work. Or am I smart if I'm failing? It's hard. It's personal. And because, again, we reject the things that make us feel bad, they will only avoid school and procrastinate because it's going to feel threatening to them and their ego. Again, you may not overly emphasize this, but it's literally everywhere. Friends, teachers, movies. So what I recommend is that you no longer bring up how smart they are in relation to getting their work done. It's actually not up for a debate. It's likely that they're very intelligent. What we're talking about is engagement, using the planner, studying. By bringing the focus back to actionable items and not intelligence, which they are going to be sensitive to, it will be less threatening and therefore more motivating. The second topic, you've guessed it, grades. Grades are so sensitive, especially because from the time we start school in kindergarten, they are labeling. I am smart, good, and praised if I make good grades. And I guess I am the opposite, not smart and bad if I make bad grades. But what constitutes a good or bad grade is subjective and personal. And because they're labeling, meaning if I don't make good grades, I'm not good, then grades are not a healthy motivator because they're threatening. In fact, they're just going to add to that stress. They're going to tip the table that makes us procrastinate. Grades don't matter. I don't care. A C is fine, whatever. I'm never going to get an A anyway. If you think back to rigid and binary thinking, most students with ADHD have a very hard line of what is good and what is bad. And if they can't hit that good, they're not going to try at all. So again, what is going to be more motivating than focusing on grades is to focus on the actionable steps that are depersonalizing, that warrant those grades. You are great. But you do need to check your planner or use the strategies indicated in the planner, because with strong comprehension and strong engagement, grades follow. This may seem obvious, but it's so hard to hold as parents, especially when our kids have, low grades. But grades are the outcome of actions. Students can say, again, they want good grades. That's that outcome, but not want or be able to do the actions or tasks that result in that outcome. So grades ultimately just end up symbolizing everything that they are not doing. So let's flip that script and focus on the actions that will get us the grade. This will also help account for personal strengths and weaknesses. Okay, so take me, for example. I'm a former history teacher. If I were to get an 85 on a history test, I'd be bummed. It's my subject. If I were to get an 85 on a math test, which I've always struggled with math, confetti would fall from the sky. I'd call my mother, I'd call my best friend. I would be so excited to get that 85. So I can have two totally different feelings about the same grade. Because of this, it's better to focus on the action than to have one standard, all A's, no B's, for what is good and what is bad. Okay, we're wrapping up. I lastly want to end with talking about basically how often should we be talking to our kids about school and grades. We don't want to nag them, but we do need to check in. So in my experience, teens just live with perpetual Jaws music. It's like, donut, donut, donut. When are they going to talk to me about school? In regards to your need to intervene, which you do, but also to give them the space they desire and is likely appropriate for their age, as part of the expectation setting, I want you to let your children know that you're going to have designated check-ins to help hold them accountable. These should be about 15 minutes at a designated time at a designated location. 15 minutes at the kitchen table after dinner. There is no right number. They could be daily. It could be twice a week. The bigger priority is that they're consistent. Outside of these check-ins, do not talk about school, missing work, or grades. Ask what they're learning, social dynamics, but this actionable part plus the grades, we want to contain it to these check-ins to give them space and you space. These check-ins are an opportunity for them to show you where they are at, what is due, and the strategy to do that work. If they don't know, let's have them go get online, go through Google Classroom. We don't want to shame them for this. We want to keep emotions low so that functioning can stay high. I recommend only talking about grades in one of these meetings. Again, we're not focused on grades, we're focused on engagement. So all the other check-ins are about using the planner and the actions that promote those grades. And lastly, check in with how they feel. Again, I can't tell you how many students I've worked with who feel that their parents only care about grades and not their experiences. So we want to acknowledge their feelings, make them feel seen, while promoting the use of the planner and tools as a way to make the work feel more manageable so that they procrastinate less. And lastly, we want to help them with step 5 of our executive functioning, to reflect and to correct without judgment. So once you have established your expectations, your home routines, your boundaries with screens, consequences that reinforce those boundaries, designated check-in days, vocabulary and code words, we're going to write them down so they don't seem arbitrary. If you want, I can send you a worksheet to help with this. We then want to articulate a clear date to revisit this, such as at the end of the month or 3 to 6 weeks out, just not around report cards, so that they know that these expectations and consequences can be adjusted so that they're not stuck. We want to encourage the thinking, I'm okay, but I do need to do this differently. All of these steps collectively are going to reduce the tension at home and ultimately help reduce procrastination. Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciated having the opportunity to present to you. If you have any questions, I'm going to stick around for a while after, or you can contact me here, but please don't hesitate to reach out. Yeah, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm open to any questions that you have. Okay. Well, thanks everyone. Does anyone have any questions?
I do.
Okay,
You said you would share a worksheet. How can we get that from you?
I would say the best way is to email me. I can put my email in the chat, or you can go to our website. Either way, it would be great.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. This
Yeah,
was super.
go ahead and chat. I'm going to put my email here. And then, sorry, I'm having technical difficulties. Any other questions?
I have one. Can
Okay.
you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, sorry, I don't know what the screen's doing. Do you have anything, or can you comment on your experience with how these things work, or how these methodologies work with gifted ADHD kids?
Yeah, I mean, that's the twice exceptionalism piece of it, because gifted kids with ADHD are going to struggle probably in one or multiple aspects of their executive functioning. Some of that may result in procrastination or that hyper focus, but they're going to just have higher levels of anxiety around their functioning. So the idea of coupling executive functioning work with traditional therapy, usually CBT therapy, is going to warrant the best results. I don't know if you have like a specific symptom that you're seeing in your gifted ADHD kiddo.
Oh, paralysis.
The paralysis, yeah.
Paralysis from such expectations of self, and the outcomes being nothing, the outcomes being generally poor. So there's maybe I'm not smart. What is,
Yeah, so everything that I presented on today is the exact methodology that we use to help students just like that. And Tracy, I would say that 90% of the students that we support fit that model. They're in an actual paralysis around the work. Going back to that table example, that their table has tilted so far, the anxiety is so high that they genuinely get stuck. And all of those consequences, like I said, failing or the shame or the embarrassment being in the classroom, are not motivating. So I typically in that juncture, would recommend doing an executive functioning assessment so that we can really unpack what's going on there from the functioning ADHD side of it, but would also couple that with therapy to manage, to learn those coping skills to manage the anxiety and process the roots of that anxiety. And that in combination is usually where we get the best results.
Thank you. That helps a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions or anything that I can help clarify? I see that Katie chatted that we're going to post the presentation, or she's going to post the presentation also. So if there are no questions, I just want to thank everyone again for listening. And it's really been my pleasure. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to hit end. Bye, everyone.